Hello, and welcome back to my channel for my February reading wrap up. I honestly, as I was putting this together, I had a moment where I was actually shocked that I read 5 books or 6 books this month because I thought it was less than that based on just how things were going. In especially when you compare it to January, where it was like I was reading every minute of every single day. I started the year with a book in my hand, and February, that didn't happen. I barely read, but I think I know the reason why that ended up happening. But so I started off the month reading In the Upper Country by Kai Thomas, which was one of the first pick for the book club that I joined with a local book festival. And this book is good. Everyone really enjoyed the book. It is about two women whose kind of lives are intertwined over the course of a night. You have Lucinda Martin, who is a up and coming journalist, and then you have this old woman who ends up shooting a slave hunter on this farmer's land because he's trying to bring her back down into the States and back into slavery. And Lucinda ends up having a series of conversations with this woman and gathering her story because this woman doesn't want to confess. She is just kind of done. And a lot of people really enjoyed this, and I do think that it probably is a really great book, but I had a really hard time kind of picking this up and reading it. It felt like a chore. I felt it like bringing down my mood as well as I was trying to read it. And I really do think it's just because I can't read books that focus on Black people suffering. And even our discussion of the book, a lot of people were talking about how great it was and how raw it felt to what these women were going through and how difficult and how it put them in their shoes. But for me, stories about Black people suffering makes me feel like I am suffering as well. And I really just want to highlight and read books that center around Black people finding joy and living their best lives and thriving. I definitely do not want to read about slavery and Black people getting murdered. So that definitely kind of affected my reading for the rest of the month. It left me in such a slump, especially since I only read like 2 chapters of this book, but it was a lot. So it took me a while, but after that I managed to get into I also read Mixed Signals by B.K.Borison, which helped pull me out of my slump a little bit. A big thing here was I read the previous books in the Love Light Farm series and absolutely loved them. So diving into Mixed Signals just made sense to me. This one follows Layla and Carlos. So Layla runs, I guess I could say, the bake shop on Love Light Farm. She's the third owner or a member of that friend group that we have following through the book, and she really struggles with making sure that everything is perfect, but also feeling that she is enough. And the book opens with her on this disastrous date, and Caleb happens to see her on that date as well and ends up taking her home. He lives in the community with them and makes sure that she's all okay. And then there's kind of this throwaway comment of like, what about if we do 1 month of no strings dating? So Caleb's going to do his best to renew her faith in men. She's going to rate his dating game because he's kind of feels as if he's hopeless, and it's a win-win situation for both of them. And quite honestly, this is one of the cutest books I ever read. So Caleb is such a cinnamon roll. He's willing to do whatever he can for Layla. Layla has some things happen as well, and he's constantly there for her. And even something as simple as like, oh, I'm going to bring you a breakfast sandwich every single morning and stop by the bakehouse. And it's just this quiet love that's also so realistic and so heartwarming, and I love how Layla starts to realize that she is actually enough. Like, her bake shop is perfect the way it is. She is perfect the way she is. She doesn't need to constantly be doing so much more. And I, of course, love all the appearances from the other couples in this book. And I think there's a fourth book actually coming out in the series as well. So I will definitely be reading that. Especially since, you know, the series just really makes me want to live in a small town on a tree farm. So that might be in my future. For my neighborhood book club, our pick was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. And, you know, I did enjoy this book. Thought I would enjoy it a little bit more than I actually did. Going into it, there was so much hype about it. I've heard like so many things about Tia Williams books and how great they are and how you need to read them and etc. etc. And, you know, I was really excited to read 7 Days in June. And I feel like it was just kind of like mid for me. It wasn't the best romance I've ever read. It wasn't the worst romance. It had elements that made it really good. But I just really struggled with it at points and times. So it follows Eva Mercy, who is a single mom and best-selling erotica author, who is just kind of feeling pressure from all sides. She has like this 15-book series that she's currently writing, and she has a little bit of a writer's block. And then all of a sudden there is Shane Hall, who is this award-winning literary author who just like randomly shows up in New York at a literary event that Eva is speaking on. Sparks fly. People are unsure, kind of like her editor and everyone is unsure about why there are sparks between the two of them. And then Eva does disclose that she knew Shane from like a past life. And it turns out that the two of them spent 7 days together in June, when they were in their early teenage years, and it was just this one crazy week. They were madly in love, and they're pretending that everything's fine now, but they just can't deny their chemistry or the fact that they both have actually been secretly writing to each other in their books. So Eva has a character that is very much like the Shane in her world, and all of Shane's books center around this girl named 8 who actually is Eva. And no one knows this but like the two of them. And then as they reunite, they spend 7 days again in the middle of a steamy Brooklyn summer. And Eva's not sure how she can trust him because he did break her heart, and she needs to get him out of New York so that her life can return to normal. But before Shane disappears again, there's a few questions that she wants answered. So I did enjoy this. It is a good read. I do think that there is so much trauma packed into this book that I also was like, why? It does kind of advance the story a little bit. It is needed so you know a little bit of like a backstory of what happens and why. But, you know, there's also moments where it's just like maybe a little bit less. Like they're traumatized and they've done things that, you know, causes trauma, but they don't actually have any healthy coping mechanisms for it. So it's like you're just going, like, you're not getting better. You're just have stopped doing this thing, but you never dealt with the issue behind why you were doing that thing. And I also really kind of felt like the pacing was off a little bit in this book. And then Eva has a daughter named Audrey who is supposed to be in like grade 7 or 8. So she's like 10. And there's even a section that I had a note in my book where I was like, what is wrong with this child? Because it was just so wild. Some of the things that would come out of her mouth. It was like, this is not a 10-year-old. This is a teenager. Like, this is an almost adult. So I don't know. 7 Days in June felt as like a solid 3-star read for me. It just did let me down a little bit, which kind of sucked. But Not every book can be a 5-star read. I am glad that I read it. I probably will continue reading another one of Tia Williams' books. I really found that this one it was just kind of like, okay. And then I also realized here that I forgot to put stars on my other ones, and I probably forgot to mention it as well. So Mixed Signals was a 3-star read for me, and then In the Upper Country was that DNF. After that, I read Betting on You by Lynn, which is a young adult contemporary romance, and it follows Bailey and Charlie. So Bailey is less than thrilled because she is starting a job at a hotel water park, and she runs into an old acquaintance as one of her coworkers, Charlie. And she had met Charlie the previous year on a long flight to Omaha, where she moved after her parents' divorce. So Charlie is cynical. He's also a child of divorce. He's like very set in his ways, and he's like, this is what's going to happen to you. And Bailey is so optimistic, but also sad at the same time that her parents have separated, which is fully understandable. Bailey and Charlie are polar opposites, but eventually, as they start working together, Bailey starts to realize that she actually kind of likes Charlie. She's looking forward to hanging out with him and gossiping with him about the water park guests and their coworkers, and in particular, 2 coworkers who keep flirting with each other. So Bailey and Charlie make a bet on whether or not the cozy pair will actually get together. Charlie insists that members of the opposite sex cannot be just friends, and Bailey is determined to prove him wrong. So Bailey and Charlie keep close eyes on the romantic progress of these 2, while Charlie is really working to deflect the growing feelings he's developed for Bailey. And things don't really work his way when Charlie and Bailey actually start fake dating in order to disrupt kind of her mom's relationship with her new boyfriend. So soon what Charlie was hoping to avoid becomes a reality, as Bailey starts to see him as not only a friend she can rely on, but also as someone who makes her hands shake and her hearts race. But Charlie also has a secret, and that involves Bailey, and it's that he made another bet about whether or not he would be able to kind of date her. And it truly is something that it's a bet he didn't even realize that he kind of made with people. But either way, I really loved this book. It's a 3-star read for me, but I do generally like Lynn Painter's novels. They're always kind of like light and airy, and it's a teen romance, so it's just kind of very PG 13 at most, but very, very good. And it had me rooting for young love the entire time, which, I mean, what can go wrong with that? I also read The Enforcer by Avery Keelan this month, and this is another college sports romance. It's set in the hockey world at Lakeside University, and I actually thought that this was another book is part of a series that I read, but turns out it's book 1 in a new series for her, which is fine. I still enjoyed it. It was a 3-star read. But essentially it follows Violet, who is an athletic trainer or in the athletic training program and has to do an internship, and the hockey superstar Nash Richards, who she ends up being assigned to help coach, and she doesn't want anything to do with hockey. It turns out that in her freshman year, she dated Nash for like a solid year, and she was in the stand, she was proudly cheering him on, and then something happens that just kind of absolutely just ruins their relationship, and she vows that she's never going to set foot in the arena again. But then she finds out that she is assigned to work with the hockey team as much as she begged not to, and of course Nash ends up being one of the athletes who is part of her like group that she needs to train. So she has to work one-on-one with him. It's the worst case scenario, and she's doing everything she can not to fall for his charms a second time, especially since there is a no dating rule between trainers and their athletes. But that's easier said than done when their old spark is now a raging inferno, and he's hell-bent on winning her back. So Nash gradually breaks down her walls and he reveals a side of himself that's raw and more vulnerable than she's ever seen. And lines begin to blur during late nights in the training room alone. And then a moment of weakness turns everything upside down. But beneath this newfound closeness, he's keeping a dark secret that could tear them apart. And it's like this high stakes game of love where risking. I did really enjoy this. It's funny because at the surface level, the reason for why they're no longer together comes across as like so stupid, but it actually makes sense the more you get into it and you find out kind of like Nash's viewpoint and why he does some of the things that they do. This couple is actually kind of really well adjusted. Violet has a good head on her shoulders. Nash has his issues, but he's clearly dealt with them. It was a refreshing read, and for a new series, I definitely would continue reading it. I also loved how they got a puppy in the middle of it. Like, it's super cute. But yeah, I definitely recommend this one if you're looking for a kind of like a cute and easy sports romance. And then the final book that I read this month was Much Ado About Nada by Uzma Jalaluddin. This was another book for that community book club that I joined. It's actually our book for February. And, you know, I'm beginning to wonder if I actually like and enjoy these book club picks, because I was really, really excited to read this book. I thought it would be, like, it's been on my radar for so long. When I saw that they were reading the book, I was like, you know, now's your time. It was one of the reasons why I signed up for this book club, because I knew it was a pick, and this dragged. A lot happens in the book, but also a lot doesn't happen in the book, and I really, really struggled to kind of finish it. I'm usually like someone who can pound out like a romance novel very, very quickly. As I'm kind of filming this, I actually have not finished the book. At the time, I was filming it to set it up, but I have finished the book now as I'm doing my voiceover, and I can say that the book is good, but it just kind of drags in parts, and then there's so much that happens at the same time that you're like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, what is happening? So essentially it follows this girl Nada, who is she's 30 years old. She is still living at home with her brothers and parents in Toronto, and she's very much ignoring her mom's pleas to get married. And she has a pretty good job as an engineer, and it's a far cry from, you know, her startup dreams for her tech baby Ask Appa. But nothing in her life is essentially turning out the way that she wants it to do, and she feels like a failure. So her best friend, Halima, is determined to pry her from her shell, and she takes her to this giant annual Muslim conference held downtown, where Nada can finally meet Halima's fiancé, Zayn, as well as his brother, Baz. And what Halima doesn't know is that Baz and Nada have a past, some of it good, some of it bad, and all of it is a secret. And at the conference, that past all comes hurtling at Nada, bringing new complications and a moment of reckoning. And can she truly say goodbye to one's weather, should she hold tight to her dreams and find their new beginnings? So, a lot happens there. I just found that, you know, this is also claimed to be like a Persuasion by Jane Austen retelling. I've never read that book, so I could not tell you. It just is an enjoyable romance, and the characters are really beautiful, and it's really painful to read about them messing up, but at the same time it's just kind of like, I felt like it could have used some editing, which I think is why it was like such a difficult read for me. It actually honestly felt as if it was dragging so much throughout the entire thing, and I was just like, what is going on? And because it was dragging, I felt myself kind of like pulling out of it. And a big thing is Nada does not face any consequences for like 3/4 of this book. Like, she messes up and it kind of reads as if she is blameless and that all of her problems are someone else's fault, whether it's her parents, her community, society, individuals from her past. And like, she herself is not held responsible, which made me deeply dislike Nada when you very clearly are supposed to like this character. Like, she's not a unlikable main character. And I did feel as if there was like multiple timelines going on, and it just so confusing because it's not really handled very well. It does weaken the story a little bit, and also made me kind of distrust what was going on. And yeah, it's not terrible. And I probably will pick up this author again. But I just really, really struggled to get through it. And I might actually revisit this in a future month because I'm going to give it a little bit of grace here and say that I also was having a really rough month in February. So that could have contributed to my understanding of this book. But essentially, it was a good read. I'm rating it 3 stars, but it wasn't the best thing I've ever read. So moving on, I just have my roundup page of everything that I read. I would easily say that my favorite book of the month was Mixed Signals by B.K.Borison. I absolutely loved that book. And an honorable mention to 7 Days in June, because it was like the second best book that I read, but even though I know I just said a whole bunch of things that I disliked about the book, it was actually quite good. In terms of core stats, I did read 6 books. I DNF'd 1 and my average rating was 3. I managed to finish a series and then I started a series at the same time. And just my overall thoughts on February books, is that I enjoyed them and I read some good ones, but I was definitely in a reading slump. I loved Mixed Signals and B.K.Borison series, and I am so happy that I discovered it earlier this year. And that new-ish Avery Keelan series I found was also very good and I enjoyed. But there were some books that really did feel like a disappointment, which is so sad to me because I was so excited to dive into them and read them. But overall, it was just kind of like a mediocre month of reading for me, which is fine. Not every month can be absolutely amazing, filled with our favorite books. I think it really is a key that I need to be aware of what I'm reading sometimes and know when a book is just not for me, because that could kind of throw off, depending on where it falls in the month, it could throw off my entire month. So moving on to my best book of 2024 spread, by line side, Mixed Signals has to go there. And then putting up the 2 books against each other between Evil Eye and Mixed Signals, as much as I loved Mixed Signals, Evil Eye has to take the cake for this one, because I am still thinking about that book. I have recommended it to so many people, and Mixed Signals was a 3-star read for me, whereas Evil Eye was very definitely a 5-star read that I absolutely loved. So for our matchup between January and February 2024, Evil Eye is winning that spot and advancing forward for best book of the year. In terms of my A to Z author spread, I am adding 7 Days in June by Tia Williams to fill the W spot, as well as Much Ado About Nada by Uzma Jalaluddin to fill our J spot. And then moving on to my reading tracker, just tracking those 6 books that I read in February there in our fuchsia color for June so that we could be all up to date. And then I have my book bingo spread. So I'm adding in the Small Town Romance for Mixed Signals by B.K.Borison into there. And then I still have nothing in the 4 lines kind of like reward spot for it. So if you guys can think of anything that I can put there, that would be greatly appreciated for kind of like what a treat could be. And then just updating the LV book club spread. Our book for March is First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston, because we picked a thriller mystery. And then Family for the Bad Bitch book club. I did not read Cherry Pickers, but I will be moving forward. And then I figured I'd just start including the star ratings there. And then for TIFA, that community book festival, I just updated for the 2 books as well in there. So that is everything that I read in February of 2024. Like I keep saying, it was a really weird month for me reading wise. But we got through it. I am taking it as a win because I still read. It was not a month where I just kind of stopped after book 1 and never picked up a book again. I did kind of keep the momentum going. But essentially, that is it. If you guys have any tips for how you guys get out of a reading slump, please let me know in the comments, because I still feel like I'm kind of in one right now as we head into March. But until next time, have a great day.